Marriage in its early days often feels like a fortress, warm, safe, and impenetrable. That's how I felt with Emily. She was not just my wife. She was the woman I thought I would grow old with. We had been married for 6 years, and though life threw its ordinary struggles at us, money worries, family obligations, differences in habits, our bond was strong enough to keep us standing. Or so I thought. The real cracks didn't start at home. They started at work. I had always been a hard worker. My job at the advertising firm was demanding, but I thrived in the chaos of deadlines, pitches, and creative battles. Emily admired that about me, at least in the beginning. She used to say she was proud to have a husband so ambitious, someone who could walk into a boardroom and command attention. But ambition, I later realized, can be a double-edged sword. And the person who sharpened it until it became a weapon against my own marriage was none other than my boss, Victoria Hale. Victoria was the kind of woman who carried storms in her presence, tall, striking, with eyes that seemed to strip away excuses before you even made them. She ruled our office like a queen. People feared her, but they also respected her. She didn't tolerate mistakes, and she didn't believe in work-life balance. For her, work was life. And unfortunately, I fell into her orbit more closely than anyone else. It began innocently. I was chosen as the lead on one of our biggest projects, a multi-million-dollar campaign for a luxury brand. Victoria decided to personally oversee it, which meant I was reporting directly to her. Long hours became longer. Phone calls at midnight weren't unusual. And dinners, strictly business of course, became part of the job. At first, Emily was understanding. "It's a big opportunity," she told me, rubbing my shoulders as I stumbled home after midnight one evening. "I know you're doing this for us." But the more involved I became with Victoria's world, the more distant I grew from Emily's. I missed dinners. I forgot anniversaries. I began answering work calls during the few quiet moments Emily and I shared together. And though I told myself it was temporary, that once this campaign was over, things would return to normal, I didn't realize that Victoria wasn't simply testing my professional abilities. She was testing the foundation of my marriage itself. One evening, after another 14-hour day, I came home to find Emily waiting for me at the kitchen table. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, and I knew before she opened her mouth that something was broken. "You don't see me anymore," she whispered. "You see your boss, your phone, your campaigns, but not me." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I knew she was right. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. My boss hadn't just invaded my career. She was about to invade my home, my trust, and the very vows Emily and I had sworn to each other. The first lie I told Emily was small enough to feel harmless. "Just a late review," I said, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl that always sounded too loud in our quiet kitchen. "Victoria wants the concept notes tonight." It wasn't untrue. But it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was that I'd already sent the notes, and Victoria had replied with, "Swing by my office." 10 minutes. 10 minutes became an hour. An hour became 2, and by the time I was standing under our kitchen light, Emily's worry had hardened into something heavier than concern. Something like fatigue shaped into a mask. "You ate?" she asked. "Grabbed something at the office." Another lie. I hadn't eaten. My stomach was knotted from the adrenaline of being pulled into Victoria's gravitational field, where proximity to her power felt like oxygen and danger at the same time. Emily nodded without looking at me. "I saved you dinner," she said, but it was more of a ritual now than a kindness. She was saving my place in a life I kept abandoning. The second lie came 2 days later, and this one was strategic. "I need to be reachable around the clock until the launch," I told her as I turned off the Do Not Disturb setting on my phone for good measure. "If I don't answer her, she goes to someone else." In the mirror behind Emily's shoulder, I watched myself practice a smile that said, "I'm doing this for us." I hated that I could pull it off so easily. Victoria's messages didn't stop at midnight anymore. They spilled into the spaces of morning and evening and the minutes between. She had a way of making urgency feel noble, like suffering was an initiation rite, and whoever suffered most would be blessed with her favor. The truth is, I wanted her favor. I'd been passed over too many times in my career to ignore the door she was holding open. The night everything shifted, she called at 11:47. "Don't panic," she said. "The client moved the run-through to 7 a.m. I need you here at 6. "And Jacob?" "Yes." This is the make or break. The line clicked dead. No pleasantries, no sleep well, just an invocation, make or break. I stood in the hallway, phone warm in my palm, and felt a thrill I wish I could say was purely professional. Then Emily stepped out of the bedroom, sleepy, hair tangled, the strap of her nightgown slipped down one shoulder. She looked like home. I looked like a stranger holding my boss's voice in my hands. "Who was that?" she asked, already knowing. "Victoria," I said. 7 a.m. run-through. I should sleep." "You should," she said. Then added so quietly I almost missed it. "We should talk." "Tomorrow," I promised. Tomorrow, the refuge of cowards. The run-through was flawless. Victoria didn't clap, didn't smile, but when the clients filed out, satisfied and a little dazzled by our polish, she turned to me and said, "Walk." We walked through the still dark city as the sky went from charcoal to the color of old paper. I should have gone home. I should have texted Emily. Instead, I followed Victoria like a tide follows the moon. She didn't talk about the campaign. She talked about trajectories, mine. "There are 5 senior creative roles opening in the next 18 months. She said. "I can place you in any of them, if you keep your head down." "It's been down," I said. And she gave me a half smile, the kind that makes you feel seen and chosen. "I know. I chose you because you don't flinch," she said. "But this," she gestured at the sleeping city, "this is the price. Anyone who tells you different is selling you mediocrity in a pretty box." We reached the corner where the bakery opened early for commuters. She bought 2 coffees and handed me one like a medal. As I took it, her hand grazed mine. It meant nothing, or it meant too much. Either way, that was the moment the story began to write itself without me. You don't notice how quickly habits become stories until you hear them repeated back. In the following weeks, our house acquired new vocabulary. She needs me. It's critical. This is temporary. Each phrase was a thread. Together, they knit a cover over our marriage under which rot could thrive. Victoria's timing became uncanny. She asked for calls when she knew I would be home. She scheduled dinners on Fridays. She sent late-night notes marked urgent that turned out to be things a junior could have handled. I was not naive enough to miss the pattern. The question wasn't whether she was manipulating my life. The question was why I was letting her. One evening, as I laced my shoes for another client dinner, Emily said, "I know what she's doing." The certainty in her voice stopped me. "What?" "She's making you choose. That's not fair," I said too fast. "No," she said. "It isn't." I didn't know what to do with that, so I did what I'd started doing with everything that didn't fit. I left. The dinner wasn't with clients. It was with executives and 2 people I'd never met who had the cheerful expressions of publicists paid to laugh. Victoria sat close enough that her perfume became part of my respiration, her presence a pressure along the edge of my awareness. When she spoke to me, she lowered her voice, as if the 2 of us shared a channel no one else could access. If I had been watching myself, I would have hated me. At some point, the conversation turned toward sacrifice. One of the executives made a joke about divorces being career accelerators, and the table laughed too easily. Victoria didn't laugh. She studied me. "Non-negotiables," she said. "Everyone needs them." "What's yours, Jacob?" "My work," I said, because that was the answer I knew would please her. It was also the first time I felt the sting of betraying myself in real time. "Good," she said, not smiling this time. "We'll make sure you're not distracted." That sentence followed me home, even after a shower, even after I lay in the dark beside Emily, who had turned her back to me not in anger, but in self-defense. "We'll make sure you're not distracted." I lay there and realized I had become an item on someone else's agenda. Rumors, like mold, don't require sunlight. They thrive in the damp places where truth is delayed. A week later, a copywriter pulled me aside. "Off the record," she whispered, as if we were at a cocktail party and not by the printer at 2 p.m. "People are talking." "About what?" "You and Victoria." "You know that's ridiculous." She nodded sympathetically, which is worse than disbelief. "It always is until it isn't. Just be careful. She burns people." She glanced over her shoulder. "She likes setting fires." On the train home that night, a stranger's phone lit up with a headline from some gossip site about a CEO cheating scandal in a different industry, and I found myself irrationally furious at the entire idea of scandal, at how quickly 1,000 micro-decisions could be reduced to a headline that explained nothing and harmed everything. I got off a stop early, walked 3 extra blocks in the cold, and practiced how to tell Emily I was sorry for the fog I'd brought into our house. But when I opened the door, Victoria had already arrived, without ever stepping inside. On our kitchen island lay a bouquet so ornate it looked like a bribe. White lilies, the scent filling every corner. The card, small and stark, read, "For the late nights that pay off." Emily stood across from the flowers, arms folded, as if guarding herself from them. "Did you tell her where we live?" she asked. "No." My voice cracked. No. Then how does she know? I thought of the HR directory, the emergency contacts, the ways a person with power could reach into any aspect of my life and rearrange it. "It's in the system," I said weakly. "She probably has access." "Probably," Emily echoed, then looked down at the flowers and laughed in a short, helpless burst. "We're a project now." She lifted the bouquet and set it gently into the trash. The sound of petals crushing was worse than any shouting. "I can't compete with lilies signed with an initial," she said. "I can't compete with a woman who thinks our home is a stage for her performance." "She's not?" I stopped. I had almost said, "She's not interested in me." The sentence hung there, incomplete, disgusting. Emily shook her head. "This is not about her wanting you," she said, reading what I hadn't said. "This is about her wanting to own the parts of you that belong to us." I reached for her. She stepped back. "I'm so tired of stepping aside," she said, and I didn't blame her. That night I emailed Victoria. "Please don't send anything to my home again. Boundaries matter." Her reply arrived 3 minutes later. "Of course. I assumed it would be appreciated. Don't be sensitive. We have a board preview at 8. Be here by 6:30. 3 sentences. 1 correction, 1 command, 1 erasure." The board preview went well. Success became the anesthetic I used to not feel anything else. I kept collecting small wins, placing them like trophies between me and the growing emptiness at home. Emily began to move in careful lines. Work, gym, friend's house. Home, avoiding collision with the schedule I had turned into a maze. Then came the off-site. 2 days, Victoria said, as if saying 2 years. No spouses, no distractions. We lock the doors and come out with a launch plan they'll write case studies about. I can't, I said automatically, my body remembering the look on Emily's face when she took out the trash full of lilies. You can, Victoria said, not unkindly. And you will. I could have said no. I could have told her that no campaign would collapse, because one man refused to abandon his marriage for a Thursday and Friday in a resort with no cell reception. Instead, I said the thing that made me hate myself again. Send me the agenda. When I told Emily, she didn't cry. It would have been easier if she had. She set a mug down on the counter and said, I'm done arguing. Do what you want. I wanted to say, what I want is you. What I said was, it's important. Everything is, she said. The resort was as tastefully anonymous as money can build. Muted halls, rooms scented like the idea of pine, conference spaces so well soundproofed that we could be screaming and no one would know. We weren't screaming. We were designing. We were also, I realized as I watched people's faces around Victoria, being groomed. trained to replace ordinary loyalties with a single devotion to her vision. On the first afternoon, during a break, my phone found a pocket of signal and erupted with messages. 3 from Emily, spread across 4 hours. Are you in sessions? Please call when you can. Forget it. I figured it out, I called. No answer, I texted. Figured what out? The message moved from sending to delivered to nothing. Then my screen lit with an image. It was me. At dinner the previous Friday. A candid from across the restaurant. Grainy but intimate. Victoria leaning in, my shoulders tilted toward her, the angle suggesting conspiracy. Underneath, Emily had written, "Your client dinner." Before I could type, Victoria appeared at my elbow. "We're back in 10, she said and saw my screen. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look guilty. She looked pleased. It's terrible when people misunderstand, she murmured, not taking her eyes off the photo. But clarity is a gift, Jacob. Sometimes the story needs a villain to move forward. I looked at her then, really looked and understood. She didn't want me. She wanted to be the axis around which everything in my life spun. If my marriage complicated that gravity, she would introduce a new force. A rumor, a photograph, a bouquet that blooms like a weapon. I left the room with my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my teeth. I called Emily again and again until her voicemail felt like a locked door I was pounding with my fists. When she finally picked up, her voice was steady and strange. "You don't need to explain," she said. "I do," I said. "Nothing happened." "I swear, that's not true," she said. "Something happened. You made her the person you show up for." "I'm coming home," I said, a promise I should have made weeks ago. "No," she said. And in that one syllable I heard the structure of my life tilt. "Don't come home tonight. I need space. I need to remember who I am without the sound of your phone in our kitchen." "Emily, I'm not leaving," she said. "Not yet, but I'm done being the collateral damage of your ambition." The line went dead. When I lowered the phone, Victoria was in the doorway of the conference room, watching me the way a chess player watches a board, calculating not the move, but the next 5 moves. She tilted her head almost tenderly and said, "We'll start without you." I stepped outside into the pale, curated air of the resort and realized I was learning too late a lesson men like me never think they'll have to learn. You can't outsource boundaries to the person benefiting from their erosion. My marriage had not broken. Not yet. But the crack was no longer invisible, and a woman who loved fractures was tapping her fingernail against it, listening for the sound it would make when it finally split. To be continued in Part 3, The Ruin and the Reckoning. I drove home from the off-site before it ended. I didn't wait for Victoria's permission. I didn't even grab my notes or laptop. For the first time in months, my job felt like the least urgent thing in my life. The house was dark when I arrived. Emily hadn't left a note, hadn't sent another text. Just silence. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture we'd picked together. The framed photos where our smiles looked like they belonged to strangers. On the dresser in our bedroom, I found her wedding ring. Not gone, just placed flat, like a boundary marker. When she came home, hours later, she didn't look surprised to see me waiting. She also didn't look at me long enough for me to read her. "You're early," she said, dropping her purse onto the chair. "I left," I told her. "Left what?" "The offsite. Victoria. All of it." She raised her eyebrows, skeptical. "And what happens tomorrow? Or the next crisis?" I wanted to say I would choose her every time, but my words had been devalued by too many broken promises. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know I can't lose you." Her face softened, but not enough. "You already lost pieces of me. Every unanswered call. Every night you didn't come home until I was asleep. You think damage waits for the final blow, but it doesn't. It happens drip by drip." I reached for her hand. She let me hold it, but only for a moment. "You need to prove it's me," she said. "Not just say it when it's convenient." The next morning, my inbox was a battlefield. Victoria had left 12 emails, escalating from reminders to demands, to accusations of disloyalty. My phone vibrated until I powered it off. At the office, whispers followed me. People had noticed the bouquet, the dinners, the offsite. The photo Emily received had made the rounds. A colleague I trusted pulled me aside. "Victoria doesn't lose gracefully," she warned. "If she thinks you've embarrassed her, she'll scorch the earth." Scorch it she did. Within a week, I was off the campaign. My projects were reassigned. Meetings were scheduled without me. My ID badge stopped granting access to certain rooms. I was still employed, technically, but the message was clear. I was expendable. At home, Emily watched me unravel. She didn't gloat, didn't say I told you so. Instead, she asked me questions I couldn't answer. Why did you need her approval so badly? Why did you let her come between us? Why wasn't I enough? Each question lodged like a splinter. I wanted to tell her it wasn't about Victoria as a woman. It was about power, ambition, the trap of wanting to be indispensable to someone who thrived on control. But the nuance didn't matter. The outcome was the same. I had made someone else the center of my life. The breaking point came 2 Fridays later. Emily and I sat in silence over dinner. The food was cold before we touched it. Finally, she said, "I can't keep waiting for you to figure out if our marriage is a priority." "It is," I said quickly. "Too quickly, then prove it. How?" I asked. Her eyes brimmed with something between sorrow and steel. "Quit." The word hit me like a slap. Quit my career? The thing I had sacrificed so much for? But as I looked at her, I realized she wasn't asking. She was giving me a choice. Her or the abyss I'd been tumbling into. The following Monday, I resigned. Victoria didn't look up from her desk when I handed her the letter. "You'll regret this," she said flatly. "Maybe," I admitted, "but not as much as I regret letting you destroy my marriage." For the first time since I'd known her, she actually laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh. "I didn't destroy it, you did. I just made it easier." And maybe she was right. That night, I came home to Emily with no job, no clear future, but a fragile hope that what remained of us could still be rebuilt. She listened as I told her everything. The lies, the manipulations, my ambition, my weakness. For the first time in months, there was no phone buzzing between us, no meetings to prepare for. Just two people deciding if love could survive betrayal without infidelity, if trust could be rewoven from shredded threads. "Leaving your job doesn't fix us," she said carefully. "It's just the first step." "I know." She studied me, as if weighing not just my words but the man speaking them. Finally she nodded. "Then take the next step." And so began the long, painful work of repairing what I had almost let burn. But the truth, the one I'll always carry, is this: my boss didn't destroy my marriage. She only lit the match. I was the one who struck it against the wall. Healing doesn't make a sound at first. It's not a vow or a kiss or a magical turning of a page. It's quieter, almost invisible, the absence of a reflex, the presence of a pause. It's the moment you stop reaching for your phone, when a silence stretches, and instead reach for the hand across the table. I didn't know that yet. After I resigned, the world went odd and weightless, like the seconds after the elevator drops a floor. I woke the next morning at 5:30 out of habit, sat on the edge of the bed, and waited for the familiar grind of panic to arrive. It didn't. Panic had been replaced with something worse, a blank page. Emily stirred. She watched me the way you watch a stranger who knows your address. "You don't have to perform," she said softly, as if the room might spook. "Not today." "I don't know how to not perform," I admitted. "It's like I only know how to be seen when I'm sprinting." "Then sit," she said, "and be unseen. At least for breakfast." So I sat. We ate in a silence that felt less armored than before, more like a truce between soldiers too tired to reload. After, I washed the dishes without being asked, and I didn't do it for points. I did it because I had finally run out of excuses to outsource the unglamorous parts of my life to someone else. The clink of ceramic and the hush of running water felt like penance and practice both. Around noon I called my father. We hadn't spoken in months. The predictable drift of adult busyness. He listened as I told him everything. When I finished, he didn't scold or advise. He said, "You know I missed your mother's 50th because of a meeting about a contract we didn't even win?" I told myself I was providing. Sometimes the word provider is a suit men put on so they can ignore who they're failing. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Provider, performer. Both had looked like armor. Both had ruined my aim. Emily and I began the slow work of repair the way people step onto a cracked bridge, carefully, testing each plank. We set rules. Not the performative kind we'd never enforce, but the sort you can write on the back of a receipt and tape to the fridge. Dinner together, no phones. If one of us feels sidelined, we say it that day, not 3 months later with a bouquet in the trash. If work ever asks for the part of you that belongs to us, you say no. And if you can't, you ask for help. Boundaries aren't just fences to keep people out, Emily said, reading from a book our therapist recommended. They're guardrails to keep us in. Therapy was her condition for trying again. I said yes before she finished the sentence. We found a counselor named Marta, who had the voice of a radio host and the posture of someone who'd seen enough human disasters to be unimpressed by ours. "You both colluded," she said the first session, before we had time to build our best court cases. "You, Jacob, colluded with a system that rewards availability over integrity. And you, Emily, colluded with resentment as a strategy because naming needs felt too risky. We'll move from collusion to collaboration. That means 2 verbs, notice and choose. I wanted something more cinematic, a prescription or a pilgrimage. Instead, we were given 2 verbs and a weekly appointment in a room with a potted plant and mediocre art. Progress looked like this. I noticed when my chest tightened at an email on my new freelance account, and I chose to finish dinner before responding. Emily noticed when her fear of being replaced made her withdraw, and she chose to reach, even if only for a minute, even if it was just a hand on my sleeve as she walked past. We relapsed, of course. Old grooves are deep. One Thursday, a friend from the industry called with a lucrative offer, a startup with funding, a creative director role, the kind of package that would have made me salivate 6 months earlier. He needed an answer, fast. I put my phone face down and stared at the ceiling as if the answer were written there. "Do you want it?" Emily asked, not unkindly. "I want to be the man who can take it without losing you," I said. "Then ask them for what we need," she said. "If they can't meet it, then we'll grieve it together." It was the first time I heard the "we" return to its place in our sentences like a bird to its nest. I called the friend. I asked for remote flexibility, clear working hours, no late-night panic drills sold as startup magic, and a team structure that didn't require me to be the sun everything orbited. He hesitated. He said they were fast-moving. I said I understood. He promised to call back. He didn't. That night, I expected humiliation to crawl into bed with me. It didn't. What climbed in instead was a strange, new kind of pride. Not the peacocking kind I'd once worn to dinner with executives, but the private pride of doing what my life required, rather than what my hunger demanded. "You picked us," Emily said, and kissed my cheek like a seal. "I picked me too," I said, surprised to hear it out loud. You don't expect coincidences at the farmer's market. But there she was the following Saturday, Victoria. Not in her lacquered office armor, but in white linen and sunglasses, her hair loose, her smile precisely calibrated for the man beside her. He was young, tense, with the expression of someone who had tried to impress her and was trying again. She saw me before I saw her. For a second, I watched her decide between ignoring me and approaching. Victoria did not ignore problems. She redesigned them. "Jacob," she said, gliding toward us as if the air parted for her. "How domestic." Emily stood very still. She did not touch my arm. She did not retreat either. I was grateful for both. "Victoria," I said. "This is Emily." Victoria's gaze flicked over her like a scanner. "The famous Emily," she said. "I'm glad you two are working through things." Jacob was a star. A shame he couldn't handle the altitude. Emily tilted her head, assessing. "Altitude is funny," she said. Some people call it oxygen thin. Others call it lonely. Victoria's smile didn't change, but something in her jaw did. We all make choices. She turned to me almost kindly. I hope you're making more strategic ones. I am, I said. That's why I left. Is that what you tell yourself? She asked softly. That you left? I looked at the man waiting behind her. Eyes ringed with stress, shoulders pitched forward as if bracing for weather. And I saw my former self like a ghost in midday. I turned back to Victoria. I tell myself I stopped pretending fire is just another kind of light, I said. Enjoy your groceries. We walked away. My knees shook so hard I had to stop by the apples and pretend to weigh a gala to keep from collapsing. Proud of you, Emily whispered, her breath warm against my ear, and if the market had erupted into applause at that moment, it would have fit. We kept going. Not heroically, not perfectly. Domesticity as anticlimax is underrated. We grocery shopped and argued about laundry. We made a budget that embarrassed me with its normalcy. I took contract work with sane deadlines and honest scopes. I taught a workshop at the community college about narrative strategy, and afterward an older student with calloused hands shook mine like I had given him a map. Our therapist retired the word rebuilding around month 5 and replaced it with renovation. Rebuilding implies you raise it all, she said. You didn't. You kept what was load-bearing and replaced what was rot. Like these beams. She tapped the air above us as if a hypothetical structure existed there. They're good wood. The joist needed attention. The wiring was criminal. But the beams, they held. One night, 8 months after I quit, we sat on the same couch where I had once taken late-night calls and pretended they didn't matter. The TV was muted. A movie flickered. Emily curled her feet under my thigh. It was past midnight, and the house made the small sounds old houses make when they settle. I forgave you, she said suddenly, not as an announcement, but as an observation she had arrived at while folding laundry in her head. I've been trying to find the day I did,